Please welcome our two panelists who will provide us with the perspectives of global institutional investors and share some of their company's practices and speak to the trends that they're witnessing, most of which their companies identified. So let me introduce the team. Please welcome our first panelist, Ms. Amra Belchik. Amra is the head of EMEA Investment Stewardship team at Blackrock. As part of her role, Amra is responsible for the integration of non-financial consideration into investment processes on behalf of Blackrock's clients and represents Blackrock in various investment associations. Prior to joining Blackrock, Amra spent 14 years working on issues surrounding investors and investment decisions, 11 years of which with Standard & Poor's, which we all know as now S&P Global, where she was the director in the European Corporate Credit Rating team. Please welcome our second panelist. Hi, Ulrika. Ulrika Hasselgren. Ulrika is the global head of sustainability and impact investment at Danske Bank. Ulrika is a sustainable investment executive, I would have to say expert as well, with 18 years of professional experience in the investment industry, where she worked closely with asset owners and asset managers, advising on policy and implementation of sustainable investment strategies. Before joining Danske in February of 2018 of this year, Ulrika was the global head of RI strategy and ESG integration for the institutional shareholder services, ISS acquired ethics. Ulrika and Amra, thank you so very much for joining us here today. Let me just hop on to my first question. You're both part of leading institutions that have implemented ESG at the core of their investment strategy. Amra, maybe we can start with you. Could you please introduce us to the ESG investment policies and practices at Blackrock, run us through them a little bit, and give us some overview of the journey that preceded those considerations?
So, first of all, I would like to thank you and Maala for inviting me to this great event. There is a lot of amazing energy in this room. So, thanks again for inviting me. Maybe I start just very briefly introducing Blackrock. We are largest investment manager in the world. As of end of third quarter of this year, we manage around 6.4 trillion of US dollars of assets under management. What is important maybe to understand for the points that I'll be making on this panel is how those investments are spread. More than half of our investments are in global equities, and over 90%, 90, is invested through so-called index tracking strategies. So when we talk about investment process, we are really talking about how we hold companies to account once we are invested, because there is no such a decision of picking a stock, deciding which stock you want to buy, because you are simply tracking an index. So we are invested in companies that are constituents of certain indices for as long as they are in those indices. And in many cases, that can literally be decades. So our clients, people whose money we manage, and 2/3 of our clients are people who are saving for retirement, are truly long-term investors. So why ESG? Why is ESG important for Blackrock? As a long-term investor, we believe that focusing on environmental, social governance topics will protect the value of assets that our clients have entrusted to us. How we do that? My team is a part of Blackrock ESG platform. So we are the people who are working with companies. I sometimes like to call it, we are the face of Blackrock as an investor. We are people who are working with companies, holding them to account when it comes to specific issues in relation to environment, in relation to social elements, but also corporate governance. So I'm going to stop here because we agreed on 4 minutes, not more than 4 minutes. So I'm going to be well behaved to start off with.
We'll keep it dynamic. Ulrika, maybe shed some light on how things are done at Danske.
Okay, great. So it's great to be back here in Tel Aviv. And last year, I represented Institutional Shareholder Services. And in February this year, I joined Danske Bank in Copenhagen, Denmark. And what can I say? ESG is a hot topic around the world. And when I joined Danske, I'll say a few words on Danske Bank. So if we talk about a drop in the ocean, I'm the drop, Amra is the ocean. So we manage about 250 billion US dollars worth of assets for our customers around the Nordic region, all the Nordic countries, and I think it's quite interesting because when I joined Danske Bank in February this year, I was tasked with one mission, and that was to make us ESG thought leading. Now, how do you go about doing that in a bank that is ESG thought lagging? That was my first task, and I thought, okay, what we need to do within the bank, because we serve customers, institutional customers, retail customers around the Nordics, and they all have an interest in sustainable investment, responsibility matters, focus on the environment, corporate governance, social issues, etc. What we needed to do, and this is what I've been focusing on since I joined, is to move ESG from the outside and into the core of our business, into the core of our investment processes, across asset allocations such as listed equity, private equity, corporate bond, fixed income, hedge funds, real estate, the whole area in which we invest for our customers, and really make that part of the core business.
Maybe you can shed some light on how things are done at Blackrock. Give us an understanding how those practices are actually adopted in-house.
So I would actually talk about it from three broad categories. So one area is in relation to our portfolio managers. We have a sizable book of active business, so stock pickers, who are using some of the environmental and social data which we source both externally, but we are increasingly thinking about our own proprietary information that we can get, that we can use in investment process, and how they are integrating this information when they are thinking about which stocks they want to buy and hold on behalf of their clients. So that's one area. And clearly, depending whether you are a real asset investor, whether you are investing in equities and fixed income, there are certain differences. When it comes to what my team does, for example, we are really focusing on analyzing companies. So we are a group of analysts which are analyzing companies for their behavior, let's say on their climate-related disclosure. We are looking into their human capital policies. So human capital is the one I think it's worth talking about in a bit more detail, because from where I'm sitting, we talk about a bucket called ESG, but actually there is more and more coming out in relation to E. I think G is pretty well covered and has been for probably last decade, but S is the area where I think that it's lagging, both in terms of company disclosure, but also for investors thinking about how can we make that part of our investment process? What are we getting? What information we are getting from companies, and how that information can influence our thinking as an investor when we engage with companies, when we talk to companies, when we talk to their management and we talk to their boards. And then, sorry, last but not least, is there are also asset owners or people whose money we manage who are coming to us and saying, we feel very strongly about particular themes. So it could be water, it could be climate. Can Blackrock help us create solutions that would reflect our own views, our own appetite? And that's what we also do. We work with those clients to really help them meet their own objectives, clearly based also on certain risk-return profile.
So it's interesting. So you're basically feeling the investor sentiment and seeing what's bothering them or what's on their focus list and feeding that into your practices.
So it's actually both ways. It's not siloed. We are really very much, my team is certainly very much an internal resource which works across the business. And we have very early on realized that this cannot survive as an add-on service. It is a part, and it has always been a part of investment process. I would really very briefly reflect on Larry Fink's letter. I don't know, maybe many of you are aware of the letter that founder of BlackRock, Larry Fink, has written to global leaders. And in his letter this year, he talks specifically about the function that the team performs. And the importance of that function in really driving and influencing companies on that long-term journey. I will stop here, but happy to
Ulrika, I'm actually very curious to understand what led Danske to even go on this path, to take that path. When did it start, and what was the drivers that brought ESG to the forefront of the investment decision at Danske?
I think also in line with what Amra shared, I think this is this is really a license to play. This is a license to operate from the investment industry because investors around the world, large asset owners, small asset owners, public versus private, they're all asking for more of their fund managers, their asset managers. So for us as a bank and also an asset manager, we have such clear and actually strong demand from our clients to integrate sustainability into our investment solutions and products, and also be able to show practically and for real what we're doing and how we can make a difference. And I think this is crucial for Danske Bank, but it's crucial for anyone managing assets on behalf of clients to really be able to show the let's say the real impact of an investment or the real impact of an allocation into different asset classes, and how that ties back to the greater society for the benefit of people and the environment. And I think this is fundamental. So for us at Danske Bank, this has been sort of in Danske Bank being the largest bank in Denmark, a pillar in society. It is not enough to be let's say a regular bank that does its business. We are part of society and we have an impact and we influence society. So with that comes a responsibility, but also an opportunity to take advantage of that position to really make a positive contribution.
And take on a leadership role.
Absolutely,
in that.
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's very impressive, actually.
Yeah.
Amra, how did the new ESG strategy serve Blackrock? What benefit did it provide? What value do you see that ESG has provided both for investors who work with you and even internally, if you want to shed some light on that?
So when we think about Blackrock investment strategies and asset classes that we invest in, and certainly when I think about taking this job more than 7 years ago, the nature of conversation has changed dramatically. If I think about 2011, very often our clients, asset owners, who are people whose money we manage, would come to us and say, do you do ESG? To fast forward a few years later, it would, okay, so show me what you do. To today, where show me what you do, what impact you are making on behalf, and tell me exactly what you are doing on my portfolios. So the kind of what is influencing, what's driving this change is really, first of all, from Blackrock perspective, that recognition that for companies, for our clients to achieve their goals and for companies to be successful, they need to identify and have a very clear sense of purpose in societies that they operate in and how they are going to deliver on what they set to deliver. So that's one point. The second is the role of regulation. Stewardship, ESG has entered regulatory scene very prominently. And I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the Shareholder Rights Directive, for example, in European Union, that the members will have to integrate by mid next year. It requires both asset owners and investment managers like Blackrock to explain very clearly what we are doing and how we are integrating ESG in our investment process. So what's driving this is asset owners, regulated, but how it has changed, how we do things, it has really given us a platform to be truly long-term and be completely aligned with our clients and asset owners who are saving for long-term.
Ulrika, would you like to add maybe some perspective on that as well from Danske's perspective?
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with Amra, and I think that for us at Danske Bank with our new strategy for sustainable investment, and we call it sustainable investment and with impact. And so what does impact mean for us? Well, if I share my view, responsible investment is about being invested. And from some of you that may have some knowledge about this Nordic region, Scandinavia, it has been a lot of focus on divestment. So we're actually sort of flipping the coin and taking a strong focus on being invested across our markets and where we have exposure. Now, with responsible investment, that does not mean to shy away from difficult matters, dilemmas, different types of risks, as well as opportunities. But as a responsible investor who actually, we want to have an impact, we want to stay invested and deal with these matters through an active dialogue. Being an active investor, focusing on dialogue and engaging with our portfolio companies, this is where we see that we can actually have the greatest impact. That may not show up on next day's headline, not next quarter, it may take years. But if we believe in an investment, we also believe that we want to be a long-term investor committed to sustainable development. This will take time, but I think this is a crucial and fundamental part of our approach.
I think I agree. I think when I hear you talking about being invested, I hear the opportunity that it creates with companies such as the bank, for instance, to maintain a very, very strong and open dialogue and engagement with shareholders. I think it's a tremendous opportunities for people who sit in my chair, and I value what you're saying with that. You both spoke about the opportunities that this has created, both for investors as well as for the institutional houses that you represent. What were the challenges, Amra? What are the challenges that you face on a day-to-day, even in the journey?
Two things. One is the topics, the themes that we are focusing on. Many of them are really, truly long-term. So going back to my earlier point around what impact you are having through some of the conversations with companies, because I'll give you just an example, our 5 priorities for 2017-2018 conversations with companies were executive pay, big topic, corporate governance, climate-related disclosure, strategy for long-term, and human capital. If you look at these 5 areas, probably executive pay is the one maybe that you can see a change from year to year.
An improvement?
Yes. Others are truly long-term. So being able to highlight importance of progress rather than change, full-blown change, is actually critical. And for people to understand that certain long-term challenges do take time to address. You know, if you look at climate change, if you watched a news flow this morning around UN recognizing that we are heading much faster into the fact of climate catastrophe, you know, some of these things are really taking a very long time. So that's one challenge. And the second one is, I think, I'm not going to elaborate on this one too much because I think sometimes it's overemphasized. We need to work as an industry in helping companies fine-tune their information, fine-tune their disclosure, because we have gone a long way, but we need to continue because there are questions around quality of data still, unfortunately, but we need to push forward and recognize the progress that has also been made.
I have to agree. I think we'll see it in the next sessions, how data is becoming increasingly important and how sometimes companies would really like to disclose, but it is finding it very hard to find the methodology to do that in a way that's comprehensive to those outside the company. So that'll be very interesting to see what we will see in the next session. Ulrika, maybe talk a little bit about the challenges that you've seen at Danske throughout this process.
I think when you bring ESG inside the investment processes across strategies and across asset classes, you come directly to the challenge of what is material in terms of ESG, because we all know that there is a lot of information, there's information overflow, there's a lot of noise. So how do you cut through the noise of all the information available about the companies that you invest in? This is information from the companies themselves, what they disclose, and also all the information that is available to us as an investor from our valued data providers and the media and all stakeholders. And I think it's crucial for us as investors in companies to address what is material for the companies. This we can do by having an active dialogue based on the information that we have about the companies, the facts that the companies disclose, and then discussing potential gaps in disclosure versus what is available from an outside, and to really understand what makes sense for the companies and what are the risks and opportunities for us and investors. So I think that the materiality is a challenge, and for us, we in our new strategy we're working with the SASB framework, which I think we will hear more about in the next session. That helps us to identify what is material for companies in different sectors in relation to sustainability matters.
That's very important. It's very important. Actually, it leads me to actually understanding, is there a case study maybe at Blackrock that integrating the ESG strategy has been, something that you would like to maybe to share with us, a very successful case study?
I mean, what does that mean, integrating ESG? There are many case studies, and I think some are the case studies where we have influenced companies in order to improve their disclosure. In other cases, I can give you an example from the UK, where we have worked with the whole market to really influence thinking around pension contributions. For the benefit of the audience, in the UK market, executives get a substantial lump sum of money towards their pension contributions. I'm talking about £500,000 per year. And if you look at further down in the organization, you will observe that in some cases, rest of workforce goes as little as 6% of their annual salary. And we have identified that problem 2 or 3 years ago, and we have written to all UK companies and asked them to really change that behavior. We are starting to see that coming through. And this year we have disclosed in our public reporting the fact that almost 1/3 of UK companies have actually moved away from these massive lump sum payments to their executives towards aligning them with their workforce. So that's a kind of market level impact that we have made, but it's the one that it's really very close to the heart of people who are actually saving for retirement, and they are more likely to be in that 6% category than the executives who are going to be paid £500,000 for their pension every year.
It's amazing progress. Ulrika, is there one that stands out for you as a case study with Danske?
There are many cases, but given that we are integrating ESG into the investment process, and we are asking our fund managers, the portfolio managers who are tasked with the buying and selling of shares, to address this as part of their investment decision and dialogue with the companies. One example is for our small cap equity fund, where we are invested in a property company. So these are smaller companies. So just to start with, disclosure, there's less disclosure. And so we've had a number of meetings with this company on what is material for them as a property company. They're focusing on urban development and commercial properties. And so we have been discussing very concretely how to deal with, let's say, in the ESG space, so in the environmental space, looking at material selection and also the safety of their products. On the governance side, we have been looking at how they can collaborate within Sweden, in this case, for sustainable development of city districts. And on the social side, we're discussing with them very concretely to put targets for their supply chain management and the inspections that they have, because that goes very far away from Sweden, and so there's a few topics that we are discussing with the company. And given it's a smaller company, the interaction between us as an investor and the company, it's mutually benefiting. It almost creating a bit of a partnership between us and the company to help them grow in a sustainable way.
Do you see institutions' role as leading this field, or do you see regulation taking on maybe a further responsibility in promoting this field? How do you see that balance between ESG led by from institutional investor perspective and that the regulation is pushing forward?
I mean, for many years we've always said that the asset owners of the world, the large pension funds, are driving this field. But now we also see regulation very clearly. We'll see very much coming is from the retail side, consumers setting new trends and shaping this industry going forward. That's what I think.
That's very interesting, actually. I wouldn't have thought that they had that voice.
I think it's coming, for
Amra,
sure.
how do you see that?
I think what's important to recognize is that this is not an area, or this is not an issue that's going to be fixed by one group of stakeholders. I think we all should play to our own strengths. I think investors have a power, investors have a voice, but in some cases where progress is slow coming, maybe some form of regulation can also be helpful. I think what is also important, really important to constantly keep in mind, and I think it's sometimes missing from conversation, is to remind ourselves that investors, when we talk about some of these topics, we are investing somebody's money. And there are people who are relying on us to make those investments in a way that they have something to retire on. I sometimes feel that that's forgotten and that's taken out of equation, which I think is absolutely critical to be reminded of all the time.
And how do you expect this industry to evolve? 3-5 years from now, what do you think we should expect from ESG and impact investment?
So one of my responsibilities in Standard & Poor's, when I joined Standard & Poor's back in 2000, I actually joined governance services team. And those were the days when, just after for those older of us in the room, emerging markets, financial crises, where the governance came at the forefront because the key reason for the crisis were failures in corporate governance. And when I think about where we were then, and when I think about where we are on ENS today, I think there will be a moment where we will not have a separate panels on ESG, because it will become an integral part of investment process, and that's where it needs to sit. And I feel that that's really something that maybe in 5, I don't think it's going to take 10 years as it did with governance maybe.
I agree.
I think it's going to be much faster, but that's ultimately where I think we are heading, and I'm very comfortable with that.
Ulrika, where do you see ESG in 5 years' time?
I agree. I think that for ESG to really matters, it needs to be integrated, and it needs to be part of the investors, the asset managers, the fund managers' DNA, so to speak. That means that some of the how should I phrase it? Some of the fluffiness of these matters and the marketing campaigns and what's out on the outside, with the nice balloons, pictures of children and flowers, that's all nice. But it needs to be integrated so that the investment managers who invests on behalf of customers really can make a substantial difference. So the wording might be different in how we talk about sustainable investment.
Thank you. I'm just going to close off with a question actually to the both of you. We're all familiar with the question of when is the right moment, for companies to start managing their ESG strategies and allocate the necessary resources internally to do that, which are substantial at some point, and actually sometimes away from the day-to-day running of the business. Is it when investors start asking them to do it? Is it when regulations start raising the bar? What would you advise companies that consider integrating ESG into their practices and approach it? And if they do, what should they be doing? What should they start with? What should they follow? How do they actually measure it for themselves? That's actually very interesting even for me to hear, and maybe from some other IR colleagues. Some of my IR colleagues are also in the audience.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping in first. Good. We know each other actually for a long time, so we can do this. Look, I think the most humbling question, and start simple, is why is this important to me? I don't want to do this for window dressing.
Absolutely.
To your point. If this is important to my business, then me as a CEO, me as a part of the board of directors, need to understand why is it important. Because without that starting point, without that narrative which talks about why is this important for my business, and why is this part of my, if you want, operational excellence, about my sense of purpose for long term, investors will see through the fact that this is window dressing rather than something what is critical and integral to the business.
Ulrika?
The risk of me repeating myself, but for companies, including my own company, Danske Bank, for own our sustainability agenda and really address those matters that are crucial for us or for companies to be part of society at large and to provide services and products and be profitable business. You have to deal with sustainability from a strategic aspect. That means also for companies to also cut through the noise and really think hard about what makes a difference. This is also a leadership issue for sure. And yeah.
Thank you so very much, both of you, Ulrika, Amra. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to proceed directly to the second session, for which I would invite